All right, let's jump right in. We're going to tackle a really common idea today, something we all kind of take for granted. The idea that young people, they're always on the right side of history. I mean, it just feels true, right? Young people have the passion, the idealism. But here's the thing. The source material we're digging into for this explainer, it tells it, well, a much, much more complicated story. You know the story. It's this cherished cultural myth that youth just naturally owns moral clarity, that they're the engine of progress. And look, it's a nice thought, a comforting one, and honestly, we almost never stop to question it. But what if that's not the whole picture? The argument in our source today is that history is a pretty unsentimental teacher, and it presents a pretty shocking counter-narrative to that comforting idea. Okay, so let's get into it. First up, we're heading to 20th century Europe, because this is where we see youthful idealism fueling some of the absolute worst dictatorships in history. Just get a load of this statistic. In 1917, 75%, three-quarters, of the Bolshevik Party members were under the age of 35. These are the people who led the Russian Revolution. This was not some old guard movement. Not at all. It was driven overwhelmingly by the young. And the result of all that youthful utopian energy? A totalitarian system that, according to the source material, led to the deaths of 100 million people. 100 million. That's not progress, that's a catastrophe on a scale it's hard to even wrap your head around. Okay, let's look at another example from that same period, and this one is just as chilling. Think about Germany before the Nazis seized power. A full 50% of the party's members were younger than 30. And it wasn't just that they were young, they were way younger than their competition. When you look at this chart, you can see the Nazi Party was, on average, about 30% younger than the other major political parties. So this ideology wasn't grabbing a jaded older generation, it was literally propelled by the passionate energy of young people. And this was no accident. It was a strategy. Hitler deliberately and very effectively weaponized this age gap. He framed his whole movement as this heroic battle of the young against, and this is a direct quote, the senile sterility of the old guard. Chilling stuff. But this pattern wasn't just a European thing, not at all. Now we're going to shift our focus over to Asia, where the consequences of youth-led revolutions were, well, every bit as devastating. So to really get what happened next, you need to understand this concept of year zero. It's this incredibly fanatical idea that in order to build a perfect new society, you first have to completely erase everything that came before. All of it. History, cultures, social structures, everything. Now, in Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge took this year zero idea and ran with it with absolute fanaticism. And get this, when they took over the country in 1975, the average age of their members was just 22 or 23. Let that sink in. An entire country was taken over by a movement of people who were barely out of their teens. And what was the result of their little year zero experiment? Over a third of Cambodia's entire population died. A third. A whole generation's ambition turned into a nation's absolute worst nightmare. And we see this exact same pattern again in China during the Cultural Revolution. This time, it's teenagers and young adults. We're talking kids as young as 13 to 25, who were basically weaponized. They were formed into the Red Guards, which was essentially Mao's personal army for purging the country of its own history and its intellectuals. And again, we have to look at the human cost. The sheer fervor of these young Red Guards is directly tied to the deaths of 2 million people. And that's on top of the tens of millions who had already died under Mao's rule. It's staggering. All right, for our last case study, we're going to Iran for a story that is just packed with tragic, tragic irony. So one of the main groups that helped overthrow the Shah was called the People's Mujahideen. And here we go again with the age thing. An unbelievable 76% of their members were under 26. They were young, they were full of ideals, and they were fighting for what they truly believed was going to be a free and open society. But here's the tragic twist. Their revolution got completely hijacked. So step one, they succeed. They overthrow the Shah. They're aiming for freedom. But then their youthful energy gets co-opted by the mullahs, who turn around and establish this super rigid theocracy. And the final brutal irony, the very same young revolutionaries who fought for freedom were then outlawed, hunted down, and exterminated by the exact regime they helped bring to power.
So, okay, we've looked at all these really intense historical examples. What's the takeaway here? What does this all mean? Well, the source material we're drawing from offers a really clear and pretty sobering warning.
The central argument here is that these stories, from Russia, Germany, Cambodia, China, Iran, they aren't just one-offs. They're not isolated anomalies. Instead, they form a clear and really disturbing historical pattern, a pattern where youthful idealism, when it gets mixed up with a radical ideology, can lead to absolute atrocity. So what's the big conclusion from the source? Well, first, that youthful zeal can absolutely become an engine for atrocity. It can be weaponized. Second, that just being young doesn't automatically give you a superior moral compass. And the author makes a point to say this historical pattern finds echoes today, which brings us to the most important point of all. We should be judging movements based on their ideas and their actual consequences, not just on the age of the people who follow them. And that really leaves us with one final, crucial question to think about. When you look at the world around you today, are we judging movements by the quality of their ideas? Or are we still kind of seduced by this myth of youthful moral clarity? Because if history teaches us anything, is that the stakes are just way, way too high to get that answer wrong.